Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. I am Kirsty and this is Stuck in the Mud. I want to thank you for joining me today and taking your first steps on your road to recovery from OCD and anxiety. In today's video, I'm discussing the one compulsion that is holding you back from recovery from OCD and anxiety. And it's the one compulsion we all do. If we have OCD, we all do it. And it's one that's not often discussed an awful lot because when we think of OCD compulsions, we think of the physical ones, the checking, the tapping, all these routines we do, these rituals that we engage in. And we think of that as a physical thing, when in fact, a lot of the compulsions behind OCD that keep it going are actually mental compulsions. And mental compulsions that I'm talking about is rumination. Rumination, it really is what keeps OCD going. And because we can't see it, it's not like a physical thing, we don't really even realize we're doing it. We don't even realize we're engaging with it. And this is the sneaky thing about it. We can be thinking we're doing everything with our treatment for OCD, like exposure and response prevention. We're exposing ourselves to things and we're thinking, well, why am I not getting better? And that is probably because you're not doing the response prevention, which is we actually are still responding to it because we're giving it a lot of attention in our mind. We're actually involving ourselves with it. We're engaging with it. We're trying to problem solve. We're trying to fix it. We're trying to challenge it mentally. We're going over and over the details. We're analyzing it and trying to come up with some certainty. We're trying to rationalize with it, and that's all engagement. That's all responding to it. That's a compulsion in itself. So OCD and anxiety needs our involvement to survive. It needs our engagement. So the more we interact with it, the more attention we give it, the bigger and stronger it gets, and the more of a hold it has on us. And that's why we often feel so stuck, because we don't realize how much time we're giving it in our heads. We're really just giving it so much importance. And this was a real learning curve for myself, because I didn't realize how much time I was actually engaging with it. And to be honest, it was all day, every day. I had these thoughts just constantly going round and round in my head, and I'm trying to problem solve, I'm trying to fix them, I'm trying to challenge them, I'm trying to rationalize with them, I'm trying to come up with a solution, and just over analyzing everything. And it was just keeping it going. It's just keeping OCD actually going and making it worse, much worse than it needs to be. And it actually muddies the waters. It actually makes everything so much more confusing the more attention we give it, because we often think that that's going to fix it. The more time we give it, the more we'll come to that certainty and conclusion, when in fact the opposite happens. The more confusing it gets and the less clarity we have over it. So that was a real big thing for me that I had to overcome, because we can't control what thoughts we get in our heads. As part of OCD, we want to control things, and we can't control our thoughts. No one can. I challenge anyone to try and control their thoughts. You can't do it. And the thing is, we can have some control over our involvement with them. And this is the big change. This is where the big change happens with your recovery from OCD and anxiety, because we realize we can respond differently when we build that awareness to these safety-seeking behaviors and our involvement with it, mentally. Those mental compulsions that we feel we have to figure out, we have to problem solve. We have to just pull everything apart in our heads, trying to come up with some kind of conclusion to give us some relief, some peace. And that never comes. We often think doing all this is going to give us, like I said, that clarity and that peace of mind, and it just doesn't come. Because that is how OCD survives. You can think of it like a fire. A fire needs oxygen to survive. OCD needs your involvement. If you want to compare it to something like that, you can think of it as a fire. It needs your involvement, OCD. And the fire will keep burning, and, it'll become really ferocious the more fuel we add to it. The more we add to it, it's just going to get bigger and stronger. But the amazing thing happens when we starve OCD of what it wants. So if we starve the fire of the oxygen and the fuel, it will extinguish on its own over time. And, it'll get smaller first and it won't bother you as much. But the fire will eventually extinguish when you're not giving it what it wants. It will, it will get easier over time. And that's the end goal. We're not aiming for the the fire to be completely out. That's saying you're never going to be bothered by intrusive thoughts again. And that will come with time, but it's a long process to get there, because we'd have to do a lot of changing of our behavior first. And we have to respond to the thoughts differently, the intrusive unwanted thoughts, I should say. And eventually we become so indifferent to them because we're just allowing their presence with us. We're not engaging with them the same way, that they do dissolve on their own, and like compare it to a fire, that fire will get smaller, it will start to calm down because we're not fueling it. And it takes practice, it takes consistency, it takes time. But you have to look at all those opportunities that we get, when you can, like I say, you bring that awareness to your thought processes and the fact that you're feeling like you're pulled into a particular thought. It's like, could be you've been triggered by something, you've remembered something that you're fearful about, and you think, oh, I need to figure this out, I need to solve it, I need to feel at peace. But just know that those things aren't helpful behaviours, because you will actually feel worse for it in the end, because that's how OCD operates. It operates on you just doing everything it wants you to do, and that's how you end up in that cycle going round and round. We don't actually complete the cycle because it's just, we're stuck in a fear cycle, of doubt and uncertainty. But when we actually allow it to be present with us and let it be there, we've not got that resistance to it, we're not fighting against it. And that's when the fire will start to go out and it will distinguish, because we're not giving it the fuel, we're not giving it what it wants to survive. And I know that sounds easier said than done, and for a long time I've really struggled with this because it doesn't come naturally to us as sufferers from OCD. Our immediate response to it all is just to want to figure it out and feel some relief. And it does take a lot of sitting with discomfort, getting better from it. I can still get triggered by thoughts, and I've got a lot more insight and awareness now into how it operates. And I think that's a really important part of recovery, because when you have good insight into your OCD, you know how it operates, you know how it tries to trick you and keep you stuck. Whereas a lot of people don't even know they have OCD. They may suspect they have it, but they don't really have a proper diagnosis. And so they question it. And that's when you get stuck, because you start questioning everything and trying to problem solve and come to some kind of certainty and a solution to everything, when it's actually keeping us in that cycle because we don't fully understand how it works. So that has been great for me. And this is why I really want to do this work now with other people, because I know I can offer help to people that don't really understand how OCD works and the way it keeps you stuck and where it wants you, which is in a never-ending cycle of fear. So it's really important to recognize that this is going to take time, and we're building awareness to the fact that we're recognizing when we're getting drawn into rumination, when we're getting caught in those thought loops, and once you recognize that, you can do something about it. Like I said, you can't control what comes in, but you can have some control over what you involve yourself with. And I want to say, this can become a compulsion in itself. And this is something that I've really come to understand, because we often think, oh, I've got to be on guard of my thoughts now 24/7. And that's a compulsion in itself. We're just on guard. We're in that panic of like, oh, well, I need to monitor my thoughts. And that's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is to just have that relaxed awareness to when you're being pulled in to an intrusive thought, and you're going down the rabbit hole and you're feeling panicky and fearful and anxious because you're thinking, oh, like, here we go again. I've got to figure this out. I've got to try and rationalize it. I've got to, neutralize this some way. And you think by just rumination, going over it and trying to figure it out, you will get there, and you just won't. But that doesn't mean you're on guard of those kind of thoughts. You just have a relaxed awareness. You've recognized it's there, it's popped in, and you're like, okay, that's fine. And it's not having that resistance to it, because I think, that's sending a message to our brain that this shouldn't be here, and that alarm is going off in our heads like, this needs to be gone. We kind of want to welcome it and be like, okay, it's fine, you're here. I know you're there. Do your thing, and it will fade. Like I said, that fire will go smaller. Because at first you'll be like, oh my goodness, here we go again. But that will get easier over time. You won't feel that surge of anxiety the same. We build a tolerance to it, an indifference to it, and that comes later. But at first, it's going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel, like I said, the surge of anxiety, the sensations in the body, you're going to feel all that. So whether it comes in as an intrusive thought, an image, anything, those are all things that are trying to like grip you and hook you into it. They and it's just about unpicking those hooks, and be like, okay, I know you're there. You just hang around as long as you like, bring it on. When you feel like you're just being completely bombarded with intrusive thoughts, okay, bring it on. And you have that awareness to its presence. You're not trying to push it away. You're not trying to control it. It's like, okay, you're there. And you move forward with your day, because action is what changes our response to it. Because when we're just doing our daily activities while we've got all this going on in our heads, that alarm signal is turning off, because our brain is like, hang on a minute. This person isn't getting terrified by this. This person isn't fearing these thoughts in her head because, well, she's kind of just doing her normal activities. So that alarm signal turns off, and our brain thinks, well, I don't need to fear this anymore. So then you don't get as many intrusive thoughts, or when you do get them, they don't bother you, and they just fade away really quickly. And that is the place you want to be at, because like I said, it completely, turning off OCD is unrealistic best, because it's more you get to a place where it doesn't bother you. It doesn't dominate your whole life. It doesn't control your whole life. And I'd say that's where I am now, and like I said, everybody gets intrusive thoughts, whether you have OCD or not. But the way a person with OCD responds to them, the way we is because we have OCD, we're extra sensitive to it, we get hooked in easily. And that's why it bothers us so much. We feel so plugged into the world around us, and we get easily triggered. And I always say the people I've met with OCD are some of the most sensitive people that you could meet, and the loveliest people you could meet. And it's so sad to think of so many people struggling with this, and there's not the help available. And that's why I want to do these videos, to say there is help, there is hope that you can get better from this. Because if I can, and I suffered for a long, long time with this, and it's really clicked in, where it all was going wrong for me, the fact that I had so much resistance to it. I wasn't allowing it to be there. I was just like, I just really need to get this gone. I need it to stop. And that's just sending a signal to my brain that, well, it's important that she obviously doesn't want this here, so I'm going to hang on to it. And that's why it never gets better, because our brain stores it, grips it, and it keeps it, whether it comes back again later that day or a week later or a month later, it holds on to it. But when we don't fear it and we allow it to be with us, allow it to coexist with us and just kind of hang out, as hard as that is, I know it is, because, we get some truly terrifying, intrusive thoughts and images. And you can think, well, how can I let that be there? How can I let that? I know I used to say that to my psychologist. I was like, how can I let a thought like that be there? Because I had some truly horrendous, intrusive thoughts. And you learn that the more we try and push it away, the stronger and harder it gets to leave, because we're giving it importance. And our alarm system's going off in our heads like, okay, I need to hang on to this. So that's what I'm trying to get across, that rumination is a big factor in the way that a lot of people don't recover, because they don't see it as a compulsion, when it is a mental compulsion. Thoughts cannot be controlled. Thinking can. We can have a level of control over our thinking processes, bringing more awareness to it, not standing guard, allowing it to be present with us, building that tolerance, and realizing that sitting with discomfort is really the key to getting better. When we're not running away from it, we're just carrying on with and moving forwards with our day as we should, while all this relaxed awareness of whatever's going on in our heads is still there, not engaging in our physical rituals, not engaging with those mental rumination compulsions that we feel we need to figure out, and we need to get some clarity and certainty of. The biggest way to clarity is letting it be, allowing it to be there. I hope this helps. I hope I've explained it as well as I can. I know I'm moving forward soon with some one-to-one appointments. If that is something you're interested in, I'm going to try to keep it really low cost, because I realise how important it is for people to get that support with this. I'm doing coaching sessions coming up soon. I've been setting up my whole booking page, so I hope that's something that might be useful to you. So if it is, just stay tuned, and I'll be putting on the details for that soon. So let me know how you feel about this video, and if it's really giving you kind of some light bulb moments like, okay, yeah, I understand what she's talking about here. I didn't realise I was doing this, because a lot of us don't. Like I said, you can't see it because it's all here. But once you realise that's what's happening and what's keeping it going, what we're feeding it, then we can do something about it. So thanks for watching today. I hope this has helped, and I will see you next time.